Our sessions now. I would like to invite Mr. Azfar Arshad, the IAP chairman, to give his insights on reducing reinsurance outflow from us. Let's invite him.
Hello. First of all, thank you to the Badri Management team for inviting me and giving me the opportunity to speak at the first annual conference. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum. At first sight, this topic, reducing reinsurance outflow, may appear to be out of sync with the theme of this conference and what has been discussed previously in the previous sessions. But I think I can assure you that this topic goes to the very heart of the issues that have been highlighted and have been discussed, and some of the following topics that will happen. So, but before we dive deep into this topic, I'd first of all like to spend a couple of minutes to first of all understand the objectives basically of reinsurance, why insurance companies procure reinsurance in the first place, what's the importance of reinsurance. I think some of these points are very obvious here. Risk transfer, this goes obviously to the core, to the heart of the concept of insurance, transferring the risk. Clients transfer their risk to insurance companies transfer their risk to the reinsurance companies. So again, it's at very core and very hard at the concept of insurance. Capacity. Again, I think this is again a very critical reason why insurance companies procure reinsurance. Look at in terms of the property exposure even in a country of like Pakistan. We have exposures which run into hundreds of billions of rupees, concentrations, single risk. We have petrochemical complexes, we have refineries, we have telecommunication infrastructure, all over the place, cement factories, even now textile risk running into billions. If you look at the landscape of non-life insurance companies in Pakistan, 30 plus companies, only 9 companies have a paid up capital in excess of $1 billion. With the highest being 3.5 billion rupees. So you could well imagine that if left on their own, the level of retention or the level of risk that the insurance company would be able to take, if not with the support of the reinsurers. So obviously capacity, the reinsurance players or the panel of reinsurance players affords insurance companies obviously the capacity to underwrite larger and more complex risk. Spread and diversification. Again, unfortunately, most of the companies in Pakistan, they operate within the country only. I think there's only one exception with one insurance company which have insurance operations in the Middle East. All the other companies, they have insurance operations within the country. So in terms of diversification, yes, whilst there will be certain geographical diversification, but most of the concentration is there within the country. So reinsurance again affords this opportunity for insurance companies, to have to place their risk with reinsurance who have a much diversified portfolio. Protection against catastrophes. I think this generation is very well aware of the catastrophes that have been experienced in the country over the last, I think, maybe let's go back to 20 years only. So we all remember, I believe, what happened in 2005, the earthquake that happened in Karachi, large-scale damage to both life as well as property infrastructure damage. We also, I think, remember the 2010 floods. I think reference was also made in one of the slides that were presented earlier. Affected the entire length of the country, of north up till Sindh. All the infrastructure, agriculture infrastructure, as well as property infrastructure, which along both sides of the Indus were greatly impacted by these floods. 2007, again, I think it's very clearly it was a catastrophe, obviously not a natural catastrophe, but if I can use the word human-induced catastrophe, it was definitely. Large-scale again damage and destruction was caused. Karachi airport event, again a very catastrophic loss, 2014, that happened, resulting in losses to the tune of billions of rupees as a result of the terrorist attack that happened. Then recently the pandemic losses as well. I mean, reinsurance is very critical, and it provides, and these are the moments in which the reinsurance support comes in to the help and aid of the insurance companies, and some of the losses, or in fact, in these cases, most of the losses are mitigated. So, very critical function of reinsurance. Managing volatility, I think, yeah, this is slightly understated, but again, equally very important. We have some good years, like we saw in the chart, where the loss ratios, the gross loss ratios were hovering in the late 30s, early 40s, and then we have some not so good years as well, where the loss ratios goes, and I think the worst that has happened is it can go in excess of 70%. So, I mean, the concept of not having insurance, you can have a very good year, and then you can have a very bad year. So the volatility aspect, and this is very critical for businesses. They say one of the things that businesses need to thrive is certainty. Certainty in terms of economics, certainty in terms of politics, certainty in terms of finances. So the reinsurance, this aspect of reinsurance, which is slightly understated, it provides that. Yes, in the good year, the profits are shared with the reinsurance companies, but again, in the bad years, which happens once in a while, the losses then are also recouped. So managing volatility is very critical. And obviously, reinsurance, by virtue of the nature of their business, they are working with players from dozens of companies, both within the region and outside. So the technical expertise that insurance companies gain with their interaction with the reinsurance companies is obviously very critical. So I just wanted to lay the framework. While the topic may suggest reducing reinsurance outflow, it is obviously critical, as you will see in some of the following slides. But I think the importance of getting reinsurance and the importance of getting proper reinsurance obviously should not be lost in that in our thrust to see how the reinsurance outflows can be managed. Okay. Yeah. So I think there were talks. I think it was mentioned 50% of the premiums go out of the country, and that's absolutely correct. If you look at it, and this figure, by the way, has remained consistent over the last several years. 53% of the gross written premiums and contribution of our non-life industry go out, is spent as part of reinsurance. Obviously, not all of it goes out. Part of it is obviously also given to PACRI, the public sector reinsurance company. But when you look at their numbers, 75% of the premium also go out. So they only retain 25% of the premium that the industry passes on to them. So we have 53% and only a 46%. This is overall. This includes the motor portfolio, this includes the property portfolio, this includes the marine and health. So it also includes motor and health, where the retention is much higher. Another, I think, important factor here that you will notice, I've categorized the industries in terms of large, medium, and small, and the yardstick that I'm using here is that which is proposed by background. So any company which has a market share of 5% and above is categorized under the large category, with 1% and 5% in the medium category, and less than 1% in the small category. By the way, there are 6 companies in the top category who have a market share of more than 5%, excluding NICL. 10 companies in the medium category, and the remaining companies in the small category. So, I mean, some of the, when you look at the individual breakup, some of them will not, follow conventional wisdom. I mean, the conventional wisdom would be large companies would have larger capitals, would have bigger capacities, so their retention should be slightly higher, right? But here, as you would notice, the bigger, larger companies, their retention, in fact, is lower. It's lower than the average, in fact. And the highest retention is by the medium companies and the small companies. Well, the explanation is very simple. I think most of the larger projects, the infrastructure projects, the road networks, the hydro, the dams, and all these infrastructure major projects, obviously insured by these large companies. where the extent of retention is very low and the extent of reinsurance is very high. So this figure that you see here, 58% reinsurance percentage of large company, is not a reflection that these large companies have lower capacity. It's just that they're doing more of these big projects, and it's very obvious here. So 68% of the business is done by these large companies, which includes the bigger companies. So in the life, I just put in this figure. As you see, I think the life companies, obviously, they are smaller, lesser in numbers. I think around 10 odd life insurance companies. The bravery is high, and the issue of concentration obviously is not as severe or as pronounced as in the non-life sector. Hence, their retention ratio is 98%, and this has been remaining. And by the way, this is not unique to Pakistan. I think even if you look at the regional players in the market, in India, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, the retention of life insurance companies normally is very close, between the 97 to 99 percentile. So this issue that we'll now be discussing in terms of reduction of reinsurance outflow will obviously, because this issue is pertaining to the non-life sector. So for now on, we'll only be discussing what's happening in the non-life sector. So yes, in Pakistan, is this 53% too high? Is it normal? Is it too low? So what's the benchmark? I think for benchmark, let's have a regional perspective. On a regional perspective, I've just taken India, Bangladesh, and Sri Lanka, just to have although not exactly like-to-like or similar to like, but nevertheless, there are some commonalities between the countries in our region. So, you see Bangladesh and India, mid-40s, 40 to 44, 45% reinsurance expense, which effectively means they're retaining between 55 to 60%. Sri Lanka, unique, 17% reinsurance expense. So this is more to do with the distribution of the portfolio. I think in Sri Lanka, the portfolio distribution is 61% of their non-life premium comes from auto, where the retention is obviously very high. So is the case with Pakistan and some of the other countries as well. So this is actually pulling down their overall retention. But once, I think we'll also be touching upon the property segment, which is the largest in terms of gross, and where the maximum outflow also occurs. There you will see Sri Lanka, the numbers very close to what the regional entities are. But I think on an overall basis, one thing which is clear from here, obviously there is room to manage the reinsurance outflows in Pakistan, and we'll be discussing some of the steps that I think the industry and the regulator and all these stakeholders can consider to come in line with the region. So from comparative purposes, I'll be more looking at India and Bangladesh. India, I think this should come as a surprise. It's a very big market. The capacities are very huge. The companies there are obviously quite large in size, so it would obviously make sense for them to be retaining more. And hence the 40% reinsurance expense should not come out as a surprise. But Bangladesh, just look at Bangladesh. There the situation is not very dissimilar to what we have in Pakistan. They have a very large number of small non-life insurance companies. Their insurance penetration is not very high. They also have a large infrastructure project. They are one of the partners under the Road and Wealth Initiative of China. So a lot of large infrastructure projects are there. Even there, the reinsurance percentage is 45%. So they are retaining much more than, on an overall basis, than Pakistan, 53%. But these overall averages, they can at times be a little misleading, because when you drill deep into the specific portfolios of the insurance companies, I think a better picture emerges on what's happening. So, for example, in Pakistan, our property portfolio is the largest. I think it has a contribution in the non-life sector. I think 42% would be property portfolio in Pakistan. And that is where most of the concentration happens. And what more of the risk exposure basically is concentrated. And that is where I think if any strategy is to be made or any line of action has to be decided and discussed, I think that is what we need to look in more detail. So we look at property. So whilst on an overall basis our reinsurance spend was 55%, but when you look at the property portfolio, the reinsurance spend is more like 80, closer to 80 rather than 50. So 80, between 78 and 80% of that premium, 41% of the overall industry total. So we're talking about something in the region of 42 billion. So 80% of that goes out of the market. And the retention is only around 20%. Here again, I think the anomaly that you see in terms of large, medium, and small players is what we discussed earlier. Obviously, because of the major projects that have been insured by the larger companies, hence you see the retention of larger companies much lower than those in the medium category and the smaller category. Again, is this okay? Is this right? Is this too low? Is this too high? So we look at the regional comparison of property market as well. Here, as I told you, Sri Lanka, whilst on the overall showed a very low figure, but when you concentrate on look at the property portfolio as well, because Sri Lanka is again another country where a lot of infrastructure development has been happening over the last few years. Part of the One Road, One Belt initiative as well. So that's close to Pakistan, but again, you see India, Bangladesh, their retention is much higher. You know, India has a retention of close to 48%, Bangladesh has a retention of closer to 40%, Pakistan has a retention of closer to 20%. Again, we see our retention levels in Pakistan are quite low compared to even our regional peers. So again, it begs the question, what's happening here? Are companies here too risk averse? Yeah, maybe that could be one reason. Or is there over-reliance on reinsurance? Is the regulatory environment not supporting retention to an optimal level? I think it could be a number of things, some of which we'll be highlighting, I think, in some of these slides. This is a very interesting slide. Yeah, this is the net reinsurance outflow, and these figures basically have been taken courtesy SCCP. The only tweaking that I have done is the figures were only available up to 2018. So I've added the 2019 and 2020 columns by extrapolation. Taken out the weighted average, the CAGR, taken out the one major year, and then extrapolated it. I think the final figure I suspect will not be too different from here. So in 2020, 40, close to 40, 49, 39 is it? Yeah, 39 to 40 billion if you write it off. There was a net outflow. This is not reinsurance premium. Excuse me, ladies and gentlemen, this is not reinsurance premium. This is net outflow. This means it is net of all recoveries. So the premium minus the claims and the commissions that were recovered, this is basically, if you want to compare it, it's more comparable with the profitability. This is the profit that has actually gone out. Look at the number. Look at it in the context of our industry. So we have a 100 billion rupee industry. We have 55 billion as reinsurance expense, and the net outflow is close to 40 billion rupees. Huge amount. Huge amount. Right? And now compare this in the context of the profits that the insurance companies earn. You know, at a combined ratio of 90%. So at a combined ratio of 90%, the combined industry underwriting profit will be the combined ratio, that will be gross. In terms of net, the net premium is less than 5 billion, so the combined ratio of 90% will mean around 4.5 to 4.6 billion rupees. So the combined underwriting profit of the insurance industry, all the 30 plus non-life players, is less than 5 billion rupees, right? And our net outflow is 40 billion rupees. So just a few assumptions. Let's just consider the impact if this net outflow can be reduced by 10% only. Not much. We don't have to shake anything or finish off anything. Just reduce it by 10%. That means you are increasing the profitability by 100%. 10% of this 40% outflow is 4 billion rupees. So between 10 and 15 and 20% you are doubling it. And this is basically what goes to the core of the issues that are being discussed in other perspective in this forum. We talk about low insurance penetration, and I think one of the major impediments or one of the major issues is insurance companies in Pakistan do not have the necessary infrastructure, to expand the insurance penetration. You need to make investment, you need to have resources. Most of the resources are going out. So if just imagine if a part of this, a very small part of this can be somehow retained within the country. So this is profit. So everyone is making profit here, everyone is making profit throughout all these years. And there have been some good years here, there have been some bad years in this figure as well, right? So so this will allow the insurance players the necessary resources, the necessary space to expand their infrastructure, expand and invest in technologies, and try to increase the penetration numbers that we've been dwelling on and we've been seeing. They've been very low, in fact one of the lowest in the region. Although I think the non-life insurance penetration that we have, I think is closer to 0.28 to 0.3. Not 0.17 or I think that was perhaps because you have taken only the listed companies. So if you take the overall market, online market, it will be good. But the unfortunate part is it has hovered around this for the last 10 years, 15 years. It's not going anywhere. It goes to 0.26, goes to 0.28, 0.3. That's the maximum I think that at least I have seen the penetration goes. So I think this is one area that we need to see and we need to focus on how to reduce it. And as you can see, a majority of this outflow is going from the property book of business. 22 billion in 2020 as compared to 16.5 billion that here. So once again, I think, ladies and gentlemen, please do not block these figures. As I said, 2019 and 2020 figures are extrapolation of what has happened between 2013 and 2019. But I think the picture and the message is very clear. Whether the overall figure is 40 billion or 35 billion or 38 billion, I think that is something that we have requested the SCCP to provide, and hopefully that figure should be there. But I don't suspect it will be drastically different from what has been represented in this draft. So the overall situation, I think, even forgetting about the exact accuracy of the numbers, the picture that this draft presents is a story unto itself. Important question: what do we do? How do we, retain some of this money within the country and help the industry grow, help the industry, allow the industry the space to invest in the infrastructure. So first of all, I'll change the topic here. So my topic should not be how to reduce the insurance outflow. It should be how to optimize the insurance outflow. Because I think, as we have discussed in the first, reinsurance is a very necessary tool to insurance companies, and which allows the insurance companies basically to insure the client and provide claim services to the client. So I think that should not be the question of how to reduce. The question should be redrafted as how to optimize the insurance outflow. I'm sure there are a lot of things that can be done to address this. Some of the points that I could consider and come up with was Number one, obviously, enhance global capacities. Right? We're talking of the treaty side. In terms of outflows, there are two, streams, if you can call them that. There are treaty outflows and then there are fact outflows. Both obviously need to have a different strategy to address. So in terms of the treaty outflows, I think enhancement of global capacities is the key there. And when I say enhancement of global capacities, what am I saying? I think we have to look at the structures. I think insurance companies on an overall basis in the market has to look at what the structure is. When you drill deep into individual companies, you do see that companies which have non-proportional treaty structure do retain higher, has a higher retention than the companies which have a proportional reinsurance structure. So obviously, and obviously that goes without saying, the rates of non-proportional treaty structure. But when you go for a non-proportional treaty structure, there is a simultaneous also increase in the risk as well, because insurance companies then have to bear a certain portion of the loss on their own book before the loss comes for recovery from the reinsurers. And this is basically one of the major hindrances or impediments why insurance companies, especially not the so large ones, prefer the proportional forms of reinsurances. But how do we go from a proportion to reinsurance? Obviously the underwriting. That's, I think, the critical thing. When the first portion of the loss will fall to the net account, I think there has to be some concerted effort to have a relook at how the underwriting is done, so that the portfolio can be profitable. And obviously, a lot of emphasis needs to be put on the risk management, how to reduce the losses, so that the major losses do not obviously occur. So I think this is one area where, as an industry, we can have a look at it and see how that portion of the outflow can be minimized to a certain extent. The regulatory legal framework, I think this is very critical. There has to be a lot of support in terms of regulations from the regulators. You saw the previous example of Bangladesh, right? Even Bangladesh, which is a much smaller economy, much smaller industry, they had a higher retention, even in property, than Pakistan. And for those of us who are not aware, there is a simple reason. The law in Bangladesh is for any project, even if it's funded by international donors, whether it's part of CPAC, whether it's part of a global program, 50% of it has to be retained by the companies. It cannot be backed out. Unlike Pakistan, where major projects which are funded by multinational donor agencies, the IAP, the World Bank, the Asian Development Bank, there I think one of the terms of the condition is that a major portion of the risk will be placed with the international market. In some cases, 99% or even more. So in Bangladesh, it's irrespective of what the source of the project is or from where the money is coming in to the economy, 50% have to be insured by the local company and their SBC, the Siddharth Bima Corporation. And that's one of the reasons why they have a higher retention than Pakistan. If Bangladesh can do it, I think they're in a much better position. Pakistan is definitely in a much better position to do it. There are always this debate around, nothing can be done because the money is coming from abroad. Well, there is example. I am sure there are certain regulations in India as well. I'm not very sure if anyone can just walk in India investing in projects and then ensuring 99-100% of it goes outside the country. So there's work to be done, and that can be done in the regulatory sphere, where obviously we don't have to copy the models of Bangladesh or India, but an intelligent mix can be found. A certain threshold can be fixed in terms of percentage. A certain threshold can be fixed in terms of monetary limit as well. We all know the capacity of the industry. The total paid capital of the industry is 28 billion rupees, right? So some form of intelligent level can be fixed, that a certain portion of will be obviously retained in Pakistan to help the local industry grow. Otherwise, regulators, SECP, the State Bank of Pakistan, the Ministry of Commerce, the Ministry of Investment, the Board of Investment, I think this is something that needs to be, to be taken up, and obviously should be taken up by the industry. So let's start at least talking about this. Let's see how we can gradually increase it. Maybe set a 10% threshold and increase it to 15%, 20%, 25%, depending on how the industry goes. But I think this is something that the industry needs to start taking up. And I believe one of the discussions, the IAP is having a very close coordination discussion with our regulator SECP. And I think this is one of the moot agenda points that IAP is going to be putting up to SECP to see how the SECP can support the industry in this endeavor. There are certain regulations, by the way, which are already in the pipeline. Some of them are there already, undergoing various levels of challenges, but that's how we. Pools. This is something I think that have been discussed for a number of years. Somehow, in our industry, I think a consensus has not been reached. And I'll tell you a very small example. Although we don't have the figures, because take the example of terrorism insurance. Terrorism insurance in Pakistan, in terms, because the companies do not report it as a separate line of business, some report it under the property portfolio, some report it under the miscellaneous book of business. But whatever the size, I think our estimate is it will be at least 6-7% of the book will come from terrorism. And it's an extremely profitable portfolio. I think after 2007, the Venezia incident, there have been only a handful of incidents of terrorism. And there too, the property loss has been minimal. So whatever the terrorism premium is, I think I can assure you 80%, 90% is basically profit going out. So, and here again, I think the concept of pool at some stage may be considered by the industry. I think they did it in Sri Lanka way back. I don't know, it's not, I believe it's not as effective now. It was previously when they were having these internal strikes, right? But I think this is something that the industry can consider. Set up a pool and try to see what retention can be improved. Because I suspect the retention and the terrorism book portfolio will even be lower than the property portfolio of 20%. I think terrorism retention will be much lower. And this is something that the industry can consider. Risk-based capital adequacy. I think this is something that SECP is working on and trying to implement a risk-based regime. And I think over a period of time, this regime is going to will come up. The companies will be needing to raise their capital in terms of the risk that they underwrite, and obviously this is in the long run going to help increase the insurance penetration. Catastrophe modeling. I think this is something which is very critical for our industry, because we don't need less reinsurance or more reinsurance. We need optimal reinsurance, right? That's the given. And until companies in Pakistan can be very sure of their exposure through CAT modeling, the decision of procuring reinsurance, especially the CAT programs, is generally based on, there are a few models which companies offer, mostly brokers, 2 or 3 different models. Obviously they give very different results. And the simple reason is those models are based on data not pertaining to Pakistan. They are based either based on data arising out of the region, or the Middle East, or the wider category. And obviously those models is very different. So a company, for example, one model will give you that you need for a 250-year cover, you need a 10 billion capacity. Another model will, with the same set of data, will give you a 15 billion capacity requirement. You don't know which is the optimal capacity to buy. So as a responsible company, you might as well err at the side of caution. right? So maybe that may not be needed. So I think work needs to happen here. And I do believe that this is again a point which has been on the table for quite a while with the regulators. I believe NDMA is also in some capacity working on this, trying to generate and try to get data from Pakistan. So a model can be developed for the industry which is based on data input from Pakistan, which can then give a more accurate requirement of what sort of reinsurance capacities, CAT capacities can be bought, and so it is optimal, and the unnecessary output in terms of needing to buy a higher layers is done away with. So I'm sure there will be other points. Do I have time? I don't know. Yeah. So these are some of the things that came up. I don't know whether there's time for question and answer or that will happen later. I'm sure I will appreciate input from learned distinguished colleagues guests here. We can do it. Okay, we can do a couple of questions. Couple of questions I'll take. I think Azfar had a
absolute wonderful statistics and very nice presentation. Just one point, I think when you say enhancement of local capacities, you need to add one more point, which is enterprise risk management. Now, that is something which gives a very, very good window into your risk appetite. It's important for the company to know on daily basis, monthly basis, half-yearly basis, annual basis, what is their appetite. Unless they know their appetite, you see, and that they will never be able to determine their, what kind of reinsurance they need. Secondly, what do you think about when you talk about the treaty structure? One is, of course, they need more of proportional, non-proportional, less of proportional, right? But within the non-proportional, we did some exercises before. I'd like to have your view on that as well. And we found that for every 5 years, we were actually turning out to be very profitable. But then 1 year could be a bad year. But overall in 5 years, we would make much more profit. So there, one has to, the board and the management should have the capacity or the wherewithal to be able to understand that, well, in 1 year they may have lost, but over a period of 5 years they'll end up with much more profitability. Finally, on catastrophe modeling. We have been hearing about it for the last 10-15 years. The government is working on it. Now, you know how many actuaries and data scientists are employed by NDMA in working out the catastrophe modeling? I mean, how do they develop a model? Give me an answer.
So this is one question I will not be able to answer, sir. Unfortunately, no. And who has to have this, or at what stage it is, frankly, there is no clarity on that. There is no transparency in terms of discussion between the regulator and NDMA. I believe this is something, again, from an industry perspective, I believe we need to take it up a little more strongly. Right? I think, it's not going to come to us. It's just like our buyers. They don't come to us, we go and sell the policy to them. So I think the same structure will work here. In terms of ERM, yes, absolutely right, sir. I think SCCB is also now trying to embark on this, identified a certain legal portion, and obviously it's very, very critical. In terms of when you mentioned what sort of treaty structure, I don't think that there will be a structure which will fit, everyone. And different companies, looking at their size, looking at their portfolio distribution, will obviously different structures will suit their profile, their risk exposures. But the commonality here is obviously at whatever stage, moving away from proportional, especially quota share and surplus line, to non-proportional, or perhaps a mixture. I mean, there are certain companies there are very few companies who are on gross XOL, but there are few players who have a mixed, treaty structure, where they protect certain portion with XOL and certain portion with other. And I think the idea is they drive from non-proportional. I think that's very important. That's how it's going to do. Do we have time for one question? There was one gentleman I think who raised.
I want to take your input on the minimum MCR that Pakistan had over here. If aggregate all the paid-up capital of the non-life insurance company compared with the HBL. So it's just comparing HBL with the all non-life insurance company. So my question, or I want to take your input on the MCR requirement, which is hardly than 600 million rupees. So might be that will, if you compare with the other regions, the Sri Lanka, Bangladesh. So might be that will be impacting also, the reinsurance amount is higher as compared to the Sri Lanka and might be the Bangladesh.
And if you need stronger players, that meant capital requirement obviously has to go. And the industry has increased its capital. I think some way back when I joined this industry, it was like 80 million or maybe less than that. Now it's around 500, 600 million more. But it cannot stop here. It's absolutely right. I think there has to be a roadmap where the industry sits down with the regulator and then agrees on how to take this forward. We will talk of $1 billion over a 5-year period or something like that. But that has to grow up because it cannot stop, especially in terms of the inflation that we see. This 500 million 5 years back or 10 years back was the world was where the risk values were different. 500 million today, it's basically close to 250 million 10 years back. So obviously work needs to happen on that front as well. Thank you very much.